Okay, so now we're going to talk about reports and queries, and I've made a couple of reports just to kind of show you guys uh, how they work without really getting into the nitty-gritty of how to build one, which again, we can always do that later if anyone's interested. But over here now, before we had just tables and forms, now we also have our reports. And those, if you notice, this looks a little different than it did in the last video. Pretty much the same, I just added some buttons. So we've got these two report buttons, and again, we could access those from this pane over here, but it's just so really nice to have a form, and if we wanted to, we could right click and rename this when the form, rename it and just put the word main in there, just so we know this form we can access everything. And so let's take a look at this customer report. I added some additional data in here between now and the last video. And so we've got 4 active employees, and each one has a set of different transactions that they performed. And so we take all the sales data and we're basically just grouping it by employee and then giving the totals. And if you remember with our form here, when we looked at it in design view, like right now we're in form view, but if we go into our design view, it looks very similar. It's still laid out basically the same. With the form, if we do the same thing here, right now this is kind of long. It's got a lot of data, and if we go to design view, we just see this. So it looks pretty different. And the nice thing about reports is that again, it's just grouping things. So this isn't really the best way of doing this. I'm grouping it by the customer last name here. Really, you would group by customer ID, because the card number, I should say, because you don't really want to accidentally group two of the same people together. I mean, 2 different people together because they have the same last name, right? So that's the whole point of the ID field. But I was in a hurry, and this is just how I did it. But anyway, and then we have an employee report, which does the exact same thing, and this is the exact same sales data. If we added this up, it would come to the same total, hopefully. But they're all grouped differently. We've got them grouped on employees now instead of customers. And again, all this is based on our relationships. Without, if I actually let me go back to one of these reports. If I go in here into my design view, and if I go, I'm currently looking at the report in the property sheet. If I go to my data tab and look at my record source for this report, notice we've got 3 tables that are using the links that we created in our relationships in the second video, I think it was, third video. So these are very important, these relationships between the tables, because they're going to be used for everything. Without those, we wouldn't be able to do anything, and we certainly wouldn't be able to do anything easily. So that's that, and I put a refresh button here, and then naturally after I put it in there, I tried adding another customer, and it just automatically put them in there without needing to refresh. But that's in there now, and all that's doing is just whenever I click that, it resets the record source for this form, and then it also resets the record source for the drop-down boxes, so that if I just added a new customer, I've got all these customers, but when I add a new one, it'll refresh this whole list, so it'll go back to the table and see if there's any new customers there. And so like I was saying in the last video, it's always nice to have that button just in case, because access can be finicky. It's got a lot of different rules and locks that it will kind of put in place whenever certain things happen in different sequences. And so then let's go ahead, come up here to our Create tab, and to create, just for the record, I'm not sure that I really mentioned this, in the Create tab, we created tables before. We can also, if we create a form, to create just a basic form, do form design. You can also use Form Wizard, which is really handy. If you don't have a lot of experience with it, the wizard will kind of walk you through it. And the exact same thing over here, Report Design will give you a blank report that you can do whatever you want with. And then Report Wizard here will guide you through that. And so now we're going to come over here, and we could do the Query Wizard. I'm just going to do Query Design here. And so that's going to give us our tables here. And so let's say we want to look at a specific employee. And so we'll look at employee, and then we're also going to put in our transaction table and maybe job description. And so this will allow us to see what all different transactions an employee has done. And so obviously, we can see that over here with this form, this report we made. We can look at each employee separately. But let's say that hypothetically we've got 100,000 different entries in here, right? If I just want to look at one employee, it's going to be kind of a pain to go through every single one to get to what I want. And so I can just query that, and let's look at John Smith because he seems to have the most. So we'll say when we double click these, it's going to bring them into our query. And so I'm just going to say we want our employee ID because we want to make sure that we're getting the employee we want. And let's see, John is 23354. So in my criteria here, I'm just going to say equals 23354. And now that's going to give us only the employee, that particular employee. And then we'll just get last name and first name just to make sure we've got the right guy here. And then we'll get all of his sales dollars, and we'll get his job type just to see what it is that he's doing. And so now that we've got all this, if we click Datasheet View, it'll go ahead and show us the resultant data. We can also hit the Run button, and the Run button will actually make sure that this gets requeried. So if we've made changes, that's going to incorporate all those changes. And another thing, we'll do that in a second. Another thing I can do here is go to the SQL view, and just kind of briefly, if you've never heard of SQL, it stands for Structured Query Language. And if we click on it, this is the code for what we just made. So this in our design view, all this stuff here can be summarized with this SQL code here. And so the code's pretty neat because we can see all our joins. So anywhere you see these inner joins here, there's two of them, and there should be two because we have two relationships in this particular. If we go back to our design view in this particular query, see we've got each line is a relationship. So I've got this line from employee to job description and this one from employee to transaction. And so in my SQL view, that's what my inner joins are. And so this is also we could certainly make a video on SQL if anyone's interested in it. But we don't for something simple like this we really don't need it. We can just build it here in the design view. So now that we have that, let's go, and we can see we've got our four transactions done by John Smith and only John Smith because we specified that in the criteria. And so that's pretty handy. And if we wanted to just see what's the total sales for John Smith, we could go back to design view, and we could if we click on this button here, it's going to put in this total line. And so we can group by our employee ID, and then we'll just take, since he's going to have the same last name and first name, we don't really care which one we get, we just want the first one it finds. And then for sales dollars, we want the sum, and that'll give us a total. And then job type, again we'll just take the first because he's going to have the same job type every single time. And so then if I go and I run it, now we just have one line and it's just telling us the total sales, right? And so I could do a lot of different things. I could actually average that if I wanted. What are his average sales are $187. And so so that's pretty nifty to do. It's sometimes you hear this called a summation query, a totals query, or a Groupon query. And so these are pretty handy. And so that's just kind of a quick run through of forms, reports, and queries. And this is going to do it for our elementary Access videos. And so if anyone's interested in learning anything else about Access, just let me know.